and then you go and you do something and somebody says to you, "Hey, I love those shoes." And suddenly you're not in as bad of a mood. Now, maybe for some of us who, when we're dysregulated, the last thing we want is for somebody to talk to us. So again, this isn't for everybody, but the reason it feels good isn't just because they said that they like something that you have. It's because you made that superficial connection with them. Okay. Maybe they smiled at you when you said that and you saw them smile, but it's just an opportunity to be connected outside of yourself to another human being for a moment in time. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be intimate. It's just knowledge that you are not alone in this
Yeah.
world.
Welcome back to another episode of Living with FASD, Candid Conversations with Patti Kasper. And today we are returning with AJ Locascio to finish up our discussion, as if there's ever an end, to emotional regulation and dysregulation. Part 1 aired in February. And so this is going to be part 2. This is going to be the concluding part of that topic where we're going to really be talking about practical things you can do, easy peasy, to help bring you back into center, to help you ground again, feel safe again, and be able to move on with your day. So with that being said, AJ, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back. This is one of those things that I love to talk about and could
Yeah.
go on and on and on for hours. So I'll do
Yeah.
my best to not do that today. We want to maximize the practical application of this and give
Yes.
people lots of different options.
Right. And just for the audience reference, we actually sat down to record this a few days ago, and we both had dogs in our laps, and mine, out of the blue, after being held and loved on for 15 minutes, decided to look at the camera and start throwing up. Yeah. And so that put an end to that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And we just decided, why don't we just start from scratch? So
Yeah.
So today we're going to focus on things we can do to come back into regulation. But I will point out, AJ, had you noticed that I got very dysregulated in the moment, of course, who wouldn't, covered in dog puke.
Right.
And what was my go-to to come back and get regulated again? It was laughter,
It was
which was the
laughter.
first thing that we had talked about.
Yeah.
Because really, in situations like that, if you can't laugh about it, how in the world are you going to handle it?
Right. Right. And the laughter helped. Afterwards, within a minute or two of the surprise of all of it, we were laughing. And, I have to say, I was very surprised at how quickly you were able to bring that laughter in and start regulating so that you could deal with the mess, because it was quite the mess.
The only thing I can think of is he helped himself to some Tootsie Rolls from the kitty litter box.
Oh, that'll do it.
Yeah. So I, you got to learn from your mistakes. And so I'm now emptying that several times a day instead of once a day.
Okay. Right.
So gross.
They really are. They really
They're
are.
so gross. But yeah, we started out our discussion about how helpful laughter can be to regulate.
Yep.
So
in my little guide that I have, we'll make sure that people can have the link to that and everything. It'll be on our free resources page on our companion website to the self-advocacy survival guide. So there's a guide in there, and the name of it is Say Just Breathe One More Time, right? How many times have you heard and then you are more dysregulated at that? It upsets you further. And my knee-jerk reaction to that is, I'm going to throat punch you. I just want to go.
Yeah. That's like with my diabetes. Someone's like, you shouldn't eat that. It'll cost you your kidneys. It's like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in prison.
Yeah.
I'm going to restrain myself.
And people think that they're being helpful, right? They truly believe that they're being helpful, but ultimately when our bodies are not in a place where they can take that deep breath, then there are other things that we can do. So I invite everybody to remember that breathing happens as part of regulation. It's not the only way to get there. So there
Yeah.
are lots of ways, lots of things that we can do to prepare our body to be able to take a breath. So let's look at
Mhm.
laughter since you brought that one up. Why does laughter help us? Why can doing laugh yoga, that's a real thing. Go on YouTube and look up laugh yoga. Why does watching silly animal videos or when your dog steals your food and you start laughing about it, it helps you to not be frustrated and you find that you're actually not dysregulated at that, that
Yeah.
you're feeling better after you have a good laugh. Well,
Yeah.
that's because it sends our body into that zone where it's like fight flight for just a moment and then
Yeah.
brings it back down. And what do you do after a good laugh? You go, so the
Yeah.
laughter is the mechanism that helps us get to the place where
Yeah.
we can breathe.
Right.
And
Right.
that's one really great option. And it's a fun one.
And it's so disarming,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it takes our entire body. It is a
Yeah.
true, okay, so here's one of the other ones, be active.
Mhm.
Laughter is very active. Our whole body gets
Yes.
engaged
Yeah.
in laughing. So laughter can help us to that breath.
Mhm.
That helps us regulate
Yeah.
being active. A lot of times when I tell people, I'm like, you got to be active. Somehow, some way, you have to be active.
Yeah.
People will say, oh, I'm so tired of hearing the same things. I'm not
Mhm.
telling you the same thing. The be
Yeah.
active part is the same thing. I'm not
Yeah.
telling you to go to the gym. I'm not telling you that you have to walk a certain number of minutes or whatever. One of my
Right.
favorite things to do. Okay, Jordan and I the other day we went out to dinner and then there was a Five Below right across and I said, "Hey, let's go check that out. I need these little pads for cleaning makeup brushes." So I thought maybe they'd have some there. And we go up. It's just a small little store where and they
Yeah.
so I'm walking and they have Nerf swords. And
Yes.
I grab one and I look at my husband. I'm like, "Let's go." And there we are in the aisle having a little sword
Yep.
fight.
Yep.
And that is activity.
Yeah.
Hula hooping is an activity.
Yeah.
Playing with your animals, that's an
Yeah.
activity. It doesn't have to be something that creates stress for you. Why do
Right.
we when we get dysregulated, why do we shake our hands or why does our body shake? There are
Yeah.
reasons for that because that movement of our body helps us start to get regulated and once we get to a point where our body says, "Okay, I'm having fun here. I'm safe," or this feels good,
Mhm.
I'm safe, then we take a breath. We
Yeah.
don't know that we're taking that breath most of the time.
Yeah.
We don't realize that we've gone, but suddenly we're feeling better. And that's
Yeah.
because our body feels safe. It
Yeah.
recognizes that it's safe and we can take a breath. We don't have to be on guard.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what else do you have for us?
So, okay, I know people are going to be irritated at this one. I know it. Let's get it out of the way. Sleep. Sleep is good for us.
Yeah.
Okay. We have to have a certain numbers of sleep for
Yeah.
our body to repair itself. For many neurodivergent folks, sleep is difficult.
Yeah.
For there are so many reasons why sleep can be difficult. But for some of us, it's because if we go just a little bit outside of our routine, then we're not able to sleep. For others, we've never been able to have a sleep routine. It's just something that doesn't
Mhm.
work for us because our brains are spinning and all of that. Finding the way that you can get rest, the way that
Yeah.
works for you, and if that means
Yeah.
that you're taking a couple naps throughout the day, that you're taking a half hour nap in the morning, a 45-minute hour nap in the
And
afternoon.
power naps can be wonderful.
Yeah, they really
Yeah.
can. They really can.
Yeah.
Let's say somebody tells you that you snore a lot. Have you had an assessment, if you have the resources to do this, for sleep apnea? Because maybe you're sleeping, but
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
sleeping well.
Yeah.
So there are different things there that can help with the sleep.
Yeah, and that can be particularly concerning for several reasons. One, if you have sleep apnea, then your brain is not getting the oxygen it needs,
Mhm.
and that will spill out into daytime drowsiness, which if it's hits in the middle of your commute to or from work, yeah, that could be really bad. And not to mention, sleepy driving is just as dangerous as tipsy driving. So, yeah, just not a
If
good
not more
thing.
so. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. You know, we can rely on our car to have an automatic pilot, but it does not always work. Just
correct.
saying. But the other thing is that when your brain is deprived of oxygen, that can be really scary and that causes brain injuries.
Right.
I had had a few sleep apnea studies through the years, but when I had my back surgery this past September, the nurses, while I was in a recovery unit for several days, they told my husband she needs to have an assessment. Not that the mask is a whole lot of fun, but
Right.
at least it's a step in the right direction for brain health.
It is, and there are a lot of different things that they have now to support. They have different kinds of masks. My
Mhm.
husband and my son both have sleep apnea, and they each wear a different kind of mask based on how many episodes they have, as well as what kind of sleep apnea. There are different
Yeah.
kinds of sleep apnea. So if you have access to that, if sleep has always been a problem for you, go in and
That
check it out. If you're a
yeah.
sleepwalker, this is how we discovered my husband
Yeah.
was apneic was because he suddenly started sleepwalking. And we're like, what's going on? Why are you suddenly doing this? He's going to get hurt. He's going to fall down the
Yeah.
stairs or, one of many, many things
Yeah.
that goes through your head
Yeah.
and you worry about.
Yeah.
And so he had his study and that went away once he got his
Mhm.
machine and
Mhm.
he's much
Mhm.
better now,
Yeah.
not nearly as tired throughout the day. And
Yeah.
that makes a difference in your executive
It
function.
does. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that one is one that bothers you and you get frustrated about it, just set it to the side. You can deal with it
Mhm.
later. Do some of these other things, some of the things that are kind of fun for you
Uh-huh.
and build up to being able to work on the sleep.
Yeah.
I
And
know it's
and
a
there's all
stressful
kinds
one.
of things that you can do, like, there's all kinds of apps on your phone you can download, like the green noise, brown noise, pink noise, blah, 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 the
Mhm.
nature but what do they call those machines with the background noises? White noise,
White noise,
right?
yep.
Various types of white noise, and those all work with neuroscience to quiet those incessant racing thoughts, which is a really good way of helping with that. Yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of
So
things out there. And like I said, there are a lot of people where that one is you said you were talking about throat punching somebody. That one's the one that makes me want to do that. Okay. Okay, set that to the side. There are a lot
yeah,
of other things that you can do.
yeah. Go take a nap, excuse me.
Don't tell me how to
And
live my life.
right, and if people wanna check out the playlist, if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the playlist for Jared Brown because I believe I have a whole episode on sleep, so,
Excellent. Excellent.
yeah,
Because it's something important. It's something that everybody
it's
needs. And
yeah,
we all have our own individual needs for sleep.
yeah,
There's not a prescription for anybody that's going to be like, oh, this is going to do it for you. This is going to make you sleep.
right,
So you have to try different
yeah,
things. So let's move on to some of
yeah,
the fun things.
I'm
Being
down with
creative.
fun.
Right? Right. Same. Being creative is something that can help us regulate. So when we're
Okay,
really dysregulated, we can maybe sit down and paint, we
mhm,
can do our makeup. People don't think
mhm,
about this as being creative. You can fix
yeah,
your hair or do your makeup or pick out
yeah,
clothes and,
mhm,
different outfit kind of
yeah,
things. Somebody gave me that idea. Like when I'm
mhm,
really stressed, I like to go in, I take everything out of my closet and I put outfits together.
yeah,
Awesome. That's fun. That's
yeah,
creative.
yeah, and I go onto Canva and I play.
Yeah.
I do a lot of my design work around my social posts and,
Mhm.
or my annual FASD awareness drive. I will retool those every year. And so if I need a creative outlet, that's often when I will do something like that.
Yeah, same. I can
Yeah.
be frustrated about something and I can go and do something really creative and fun. That creative self-expression does get me to that place where again I'm feeling safe. I am
Hmm.
able to take the breath that I need to take and I don't
Yeah.
have to focus and concentrate on
Yeah.
the breathing. And
Yeah.
then once I get to that place, I can go ahead and do some meditative deep belly
Yeah.
breathing
Yeah.
consciously and
Yeah.
intentionally,
Yeah.
but I have to get to that place first before I
Where
can
you
do that.
can. Yeah.
That's what they
So,
leave out. And in
yeah.
meditation,
Yeah.
that is left out a lot. And that's why I tell people, I'm
Yeah.
like, instead of sitting down and trying to sit still and meditate or trying to lay still and meditate, if you rock, go ahead,
Hmm.
rock,
Hmm.
lay down on your side and let yourself rock back and forth. Let your
Yeah.
feet move. All of that is fine. Go
Yeah.
take a walk in nature. I like
So,
to vacuum. I can vacuum and
yeah.
meditate at the same time.
Yeah. So, true story about the creative expression being an intervention, right, for things that can be overwhelming. One of the things that I have had to do as part of the creative process is an aspect of it that I'm not well suited for. and that's proofreading and
Mhm.
editing.
Yep.
Because if you're working on your own material, your mind knows what it was supposed to be, and that's the way you tend to read it, as if it were correct. So it's really hard to find mistakes and fix them. And when I was coming out with the first edition of Sip by Sip, I discovered the hard way that the company I hired, although they claimed they had a team of editors,
Uh-huh.
no, they did
No.
none of that. None of that crap. Everything that got fixed was because of me. And it was so overwhelming
Mhm.
that this podcast was my way of getting that dopamine hit, because it's
Yeah.
something that you can chunk it, right? Every episode is a new chunk.
Yep.
And every episode has a lot of different things. Yeah, I launched the podcast several months before I had intended, as a way of I need to see some results.
Mhm.
I need that gratification, that dopamine hit,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That editing just was not doing for me.
Yep. Well, and this is where I honestly can't remember who it was, but it was someone from the military. They gave a speech and they said, the key to starting your day is get up and make your bed. The first thing
Mhm,
you do is make your bed, and then you've
mhm.
accomplished something already
Yeah,
for the day.
yeah,
I don't do that. Okay. I'm just going to say to y'all right here, none of these things, again, none of these are a prescription,
yeah,
but getting up and making your bed for some people gives
yeah,
them that. It helps them go through the day because immediately they've accomplished something,
yeah,
they feel regulated, and now they
yeah,
can move through their day.
yeah.
And that's not me.
For me, I try to do that, but it just depends on which animal is where on the bed.
Yeah.
If it's one of the cats, I just cover them up. No big deal. They'll make their way out. If it's my George, my 2.5-year-old Maltipoo, yeah, I can cover him up. But in his desire to escape the covers, he's going to twist like a tornado and really make a mess of things. So,
Right. So
yeah, on
sometimes
those
it happens
days,
and other times it doesn't. Yeah.
right,
Yep.
roll with it. You got to roll
Sometimes
with it.
yeah, sometimes I get up in the morning and the first thing I do is clean the floors because there's dog hair and it just makes me feel great.
Yeah,
Awesome. Awesome. If
yeah,
that works for you, great. That's
yep,
an activity, right? It's an
yeah,
activity and it has some results right at
yeah,
the end. So that's
yeah,
another practical application you can do there. So
right.
another reason that doing your podcast is regulating for you is because you're getting some of that intimate connection with somebody else.
Mhm.
You know, you're getting to know a person, you're talking about something that's interesting to the both of you, and you're having this dialogue back and forth. And it
Mhm.
might even be you might be mirroring each other's body language
Yeah.
and things like that. That happens sometimes even in
Mhm.
moments when you're not talking. And that intimate connection is something that can help us. That's why they
Yeah.
say do a 20-second hug. Okay, so I'm going to hug this person for 20 seconds. Well, that 20 seconds is actually kind of important because that if you go only for 15 seconds, you don't get to the point where you can take that breath. But if you
Mhm.
do that 20 seconds or more, that
Yeah.
tells your body, oh, hey, I'm safe. Okay, I can take
Yeah.
a breath now
Yeah.
without being
And
told to just breathe.
yeah. And people will have varying comfort levels around that.
Yep. Squeeze. I
Yeah.
don't like it when somebody hugs me and it's like this real light kind of, yeah, or
Like the real limpy handshake. It's like, why
yes,
even bother?
that dysregulates me. So
Yeah.
I do tell people, they'll like, I don't usually initiate the hug. And
Yeah.
if I do, I ask the person, do you want a hug? And how do you want it? And I will tell people when they go to hug me, I'm like, you got to squeeze.
A friend of mine takes hugging to the next level.
Okay.
And they're wonderful hugs. Wonderful. You want to know that you're embraced and loved and cherished. She's your girl.
Yeah.
But you have to be okay with that lasting a long time.
Hmm.
And it's funny to watch because people will be like, I can't breathe.
Or I tend to be somebody, if the hug is going on for a long time, I might start giggling.
Mhm.
Why do
Mhm.
I giggle? It's my system trying to regulate.
Mhm.
That's
Yep.
all it is. There are so many things that we do normally in our everyday lives that we don't consider to be regulation. It's just normal, but it's actually our bodies do a pretty
Mhm.
good job of knowing what they need to do to
Yeah.
become regulated. Just like they're
Yeah.
good at becoming dysregulated, they're great at regulating as well.
Yeah.
And so we can
Yeah.
trust ourselves
Yeah.
that if I feel myself that I'm rocking back and forth like this, I just let it go. And if somebody
Mhm.
wants to look at me because I'm out at a restaurant or whatever, and they want to look at me like I'm a weirdo, absolutely I am. And I love it. I love it. Come over here. You want to ask
Yeah.
me why I'm being a weirdo, and do ask instead of
Yeah.
staring at me. Ask me what's up.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
then they get to learn about regulation.
exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, this is another one that you mentioned. You were talking about sleeping with different sounds on, and some of
Yeah.
the sounds that you mentioned were nature sounds. So, nature is another great way for us to get
Yeah.
regulated. I don't know that I've said anything here that people don't know,
Right.
right? These are things that many of us have heard, but
Mhm.
I will tell you that every single thing that we're saying is
Yeah.
scientifically proven.
Yeah.
It's evidence based. And it doesn't mean that you have to do all of them.
Right.
It means that you have to become self aware
Yeah.
to know what works for you. And then
Yeah.
here's the really important part, be able to communicate that to people who
Mhm.
you are around. Because then when you become dysregulated, they can help you.
I remember in a previous conversation, you talked about creating a nest
Yes.
for yourself.
Yes.
Like if you have an intense need for regulation, you escape the situation to your nest.
Yep.
And I love that image because, to be cocooned in safety,
Yes.
we all need that.
Right.
We all need that.
And we all
Uh,
have different needs for our nests.
yeah, yeah,
So let me say one more thing about nature, and then I'll
yeah.
move on to talking about the nest. So, with nature, some of us live in a city
Hmm.
where there's not a lot of nature around us. We live
Yeah.
in, they call it the concrete jungle. And the sounds that you hear there are a lot of maybe planes flying overhead. It's
Hmm.
traffic on the streets, it's people talking to
Sirens.
each other, sirens, and there's not a lot of green around
Yeah,
for you to look at. Uh,
yeah.
that's okay. That's okay. If you have that opportunity to go outside or be somewhere, be able to go to a park or whatever, awesome, great. If not, you can still look out your window at things that you like
Hmm.
to look at. You can
Yeah.
listen to nature sounds. You can find ones that you like. I have to be really careful because I am so sensory sensitive when it comes to
Hmm.
high pitch sounds like
Yeah.
whistling. So a lot of bird noises will really dysregulate me. And
Hmm.
then I'm angry. And I don't like being angry, and the people around me don't like me being angry. It's
Yeah.
fine to be angry. It's a real emotion and it's a valid emotion,
Yeah.
but it's not one that I want to sit in all day long
Right.
because I'm
Right.
trying to spend some time with nature and it's bird sounds that are pissing me off.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
So here's one that probably has not made your list, but when I moved to California, because I met my husband online, I'm from the Northeast where 4 seasons hit when they're supposed to, right?
Mhm.
Fall is colored leaves. In California, you get the colored leaves at Christmas time. And there's just something, I'm sorry, that's wrong. It's just wrong. So what I did was I went to a wallpaper store and I got a mural that did my one whole wall in my kitchen
That's
of
great.
the forest with all the leaves. And there were big, huge boulders and a stream and a barn with a paddle wheel. And that would keep me from, I would use that if I was ever getting homesick,
Mhm.
but it was also getting out to one of, my favorite setting in nature.
Yep.
My husband's a beach person. No, I'm a mountain girl. So
Okay,
that really
okay.
spoke to me. And it was just, it wasn't the cheapest thing, but you do it once and it was still up 25 years.
Yep. Yep. I mean, I have a
So,
tapestry on my wall back behind my couch, and it takes up almost the whole wall,
mhm,
and it is like you're standing in a dark, like Tim Burton-esque forest, and you're looking
mhm.
out over to
Yeah,
this place that's kind of lighted in the
yeah,
valley and then up into the mountains, and there are all of
yeah,
these, like, floating islands, and there's a
yeah,
big castle, and then there's,
yeah,
different clouds and rainbows and things like that,
yeah.
and that I love that. that's me getting into the play space,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We talked about the emotions on the last one and the, the basic emotions that we have, play being one of those that helps us move
Mhm.
forward. It helps us feel good. And when we can initiate that in our brain, then
Mhm.
we can begin to regulate. So that huge tapestry, I
Yeah.
jokingly say, I will forever be a college student and this is my dorm because, most traditionally, that's not what a grown person should have hanging up in their house. It's very maybe childlike, or it's at least, college
Mhm.
dorm when you don't have a lot of money, but you need a little something. But it makes me happy and it makes my
Yeah.
partner happy because we play a role playing game with friends where there's this big setting that has this castle and this
Mhm.
multiverse, and this tapestry shows
Yeah.
multiple layers of that multiverse that make
Yeah.
us feel safe
Yeah.
and grounded. And
Not to mention a happy wife is a happy life.
absolutely. And I mean, I don't have anything to rhyme with it, but how about this? A happy mate is a happy date.
There you go. There
For
you go.
for my partner, this is his house too, and
Yeah.
we have to have things that
Yeah.
make both of us happy. So
Right. Right.
we read a book, and
Mhm.
maybe we read fantasy books. Maybe we read the quote, people call them smut books. If that's what
Mhm.
makes you happy and gives you a place so that you can regulate and be able to then go,
Mhm.
awesome.
Mhm.
That's what it's all about. Go ahead and do
Yeah.
that. And be self aware enough to know if you're using it as an escape where you're
Mm.
not regulating with it
Yeah.
anymore. Right? I do
Yeah.
tell my husband if I'm getting lost in books all the time to the point where I'm not doing the things that are important to me,
Mhm.
I need you to make sure that we talk about it and get me to talk
Yeah.
about it because there's something wrong.
Yeah.
There's something that I'm
Yeah.
upset about that I don't want to deal with.
Right. Right. Yeah, because regulation techniques can morph into avoidance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely they can.
Yeah.
It happens. So here's another one. How about we talked about intimate connection,
Mhm.
but what about superficial connection? Superficial connection, and this is one of the ones that a lot of these they talk about in Amelia and Emily Nagoski's
Mm.
Burnout book.
And we had, for the audience, we put a link to that book in the part 1 episode. So I'll go ahead and do that again.
Yeah, that and they have a workbook now that goes with it, which is really great because you can, actually do some activities that help you with some of these different things. So they talk about superficial connection. And
Mm.
have you ever like just been in a bad mood and then you go and you do something and somebody says to you, "Hey, I love those shoes." And suddenly you're not in as bad of a mood. Now,
Mhm.
maybe for some of us who, when we're dysregulated, the last thing we want is for somebody to talk to us. So again, this isn't for everybody, but the reason it feels good isn't just because they said that they like something that you have. It's because you made that superficial connection with
Yeah.
them. Okay. Maybe they smiled at you when you said that and you saw them smile, but it's just an opportunity to be connected outside of yourself to another human being for a moment in time.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be uncomfortable, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be
Yeah.
intimate. It's
Yeah.
just knowledge that you are not alone in this thing. So, I think we talked about being creative.
Yeah.
Okay, the nest.
Yes, the
The
nest.
nest. So, we talked about the nest when I was talking about having a cry recipe.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
y'all,
But
here's
that's in the part of the interview that we're not going to air
no,
because
no.
it was pre Duke Puke.
Oh my
That
gosh,
was the Duke Puke recording.
it absolutely was. But we're not gonna leave it out. We're gonna go over it
Yes.
for you here because it's
Yes.
important.
It is.
Science has shown that crying and the tears release toxins in our bodies. They
Right.
let it out, and it has shown. A lot of people will say, "I don't like to cry. It makes me feel bad." But they actually did some tests, and regularly, even
Mhm.
though people said, "Crying makes me feel exhausted," and that
Mm.
sort of thing, the testing that they did actually showed that people felt better after they had a
Mhm.
good cry.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, in our society, we're told not to cry. It makes
Yeah.
you look weak. People aren't going to
Yeah.
respect you, all of those things. And that's fine. Fine. You choose not to cry at work. You choose not to, I don't know,
You
cry when you're
choose
in
your
the grocery.
time and place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So make a nest and have that be like a specific place. For some
Yeah.
person, it might be Jessica, who is our co-founder, loves her hammock. Absolutely loves her hammock. And
Mhm.
so that's a place where she can go. And that it helps her regulate. So if she needs to have a good cry, she can go have a good cry in her hammock and that
Yeah.
can feel good. For me, I like to get in the closet because it's a small wrapped up space. And in
Yeah.
fact, when we bought our house, I even said that. I said, "Oh, look, that's the perfect place for a nest right there." And having that conversation with my partner so that if I'm like, I need my nest, he can he can get it ready, make sure I have all the things. And there
Yeah.
actually is a recipe. Here's the recipe, y'all. Okay, have a little bucket or a
Mhm.
box or a drawer or something of these things. A washcloth, something that you enjoy drinking out of, whether it be like a bottle like this, or
Mhm.
maybe it's you have a favorite cup, something like
Mhm.
that. Your favorite kind of tissues or toilet paper, whatever you prefer, a kind that you like, a kind that makes you
Yeah.
feel good. A blanket, pillow, comfort item. I have this little guy. If Widget doesn't want to sit on me or doesn't want to be in his sling, whatever, I have this little
Mhm.
guy and he's weighted and I can just hold on to him
Mhm.
and get in your nest and curl up in your nest. And that is a great place to cry.
Mhm.
Eventually, your brain will understand this is safe. I
Yeah.
can cry here. I mean, this is
Yeah.
wonderful. Some people do it in their car.
Some people use the shower.
Some people use the shower. Absolutely. Absolutely. I cry in the shower for different reasons because it's a sensory nightmare for me. I
Yeah.
really struggle with that. But see,
Yeah.
this is again, there's no right recipe for anybody.
Exactly.
We all have our things.
Exactly.
If it is better for you to cry in the shower and you're doing that intentionally because you want to and you're giving yourself permission, that's great.
Mhm.
If you're
Mhm.
crying in the shower because you want to hide the crying
Mhm.
from other people, how could maybe you change that or talk to people so that it doesn't have to be just in the shower if you
Mhm.
want to be able to do that somewhere else?
Yeah.
Cry while you're cooking, and help
Oh,
your
they're onions.
yeah, I know. Help your kids and other people in your home understand
Yeah.
crying is normal. It's healthy. It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And I'm crying and it's going to release the cortisol and
Yeah.
I'm going to feel better. So that gives them permission to do the same. So I could talk about that all day, just crying all day. But don't forget, that's just one emotion.
Yeah.
We have lots of other feelings
Yeah.
that maybe we need to have a recipe for. Each person can come up with their own
Mhm.
recipe.
Mhm.
Have a punching bag, a pillow to punch, when you're feeling angry. What do you do when you're feeling excited and jumpy and you want to, you're
Yeah.
jumping out of your skin? What can you do? Maybe you
Yeah.
like to swing.
I was just gonna say that. It's we have to, in order to get the right recipe for whatever our dysregulated needs are, we have to understand ourselves and
Yeah.
our sensory systems.
Yes.
Where are we sensory seeking and where are we sensory avoidant? And with a lot of the things like swinging or spinning, it's helpful to do it for like 10 minutes. But if you go much further than that, it can actually tip you the other way.
Mhm. Yep.
So having practiced it enough to know how you respond to each thing really does matter.
It really does. And for a lot of people, they're like, well, you're telling me I need to know myself, but how do I get to know myself? Well, you can go to sensorychecklist.org and there's a little sensory checklist there that'll give you some ideas. And you can do that for free. That doesn't cost anything. If you want more in-depth coaching and things like that, there's an option for that as well. And some of that, the proceeds from that, each coach that is working on that with us donates some of that back to Umbrella so that we can
Mhm.
provide scholarships for folks who don't have access to that
Yeah.
resource. So a lot of us think, well, I should just know that. Why? Why should you just know that? In school,
Yeah.
you were taught that there's five senses when there's actually more than that. So
Yeah.
you shouldn't just know that. It's okay to
Right.
inquire and get curious about it
Yeah.
and read books about it and talk to a therapist who actually knows about it.
Mhm. Yeah, one example that I give to people when they're just maybe hearing for the first time that there are sensory systems that look within, right? What's going on inside the body, not out in the environment, but the internal environment. And for instance, Snickers really tapped into some gold, right? When you have the person acting totally not like themselves, and their family or friends will say, "Have a Snickers," and then all of a sudden, they're themselves again. It's that bit about hangry, right? A lot of us, if we're hungry for an extended period of time, we get really, really angry.
Mhm.
But that comes back to a sensory system that's not working quite right. The message of "feed me" is not getting through to the brain
Right.
in a
Right.
way that we can respond to it. Similarly, there are people who don't receive the message, "I'm full, you can stop eating now."
Right. And then they will overeat to the point where they
Mhm.
get sick. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And one thing, working with the elderly population or folks with different types of dementia, something that often happens is they get dehydrated because they don't get the signal. It doesn't get there to drink. They
Yeah,
don't know that they're
and
thirsty.
and even with no biological cause of that happening, like dementia or, just being elderly, for anyone to feel thirst, they're already 10% dehydrated.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
know I'm sitting here drinking my water because I know I'm dehydrated.
I've got grape juice, coffee, what is this? Raspberry lemon lime bai.
Okay.
I've got all 3 sitting here.
And you know what? Some people do that, right? They'll have 10 different glasses of something
Mm,
around them,
yeah.
and yet
Well,
they might not realize that they're thirsty.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, my sugar levels were dancing with the "you need to do something" when we sat down to record, hence the grape juice. But if I continue drinking it, I'm gonna end up with a problem the other direction, so I need to reach for something different.
Right. Moderation. Set that out of your reach where you would have to get up
Yeah,
and yeah.
yeah. Grape
Um
juice, a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so this is one of the reasons why we say have that cup or
Mhm,
bottle or something of cool or
mhm,
iced water when you in your cry recipe. Why cold? Because it speaks to your system.
mhm.
That cold speaks to your system. For some people, they need to have something with a straw because that action of sucking on that straw to get the liquid actually helps them to regulate.
And, that kinda makes sense. To me, that triggered some thoughts of reflexes. When we're dysregulated, it can send us back into having to address reflexes again.
Yeah, absolutely. We
Yeah,
become very reactive instead of
yeah,
responsive.
yeah,
Yep, absolutely.
yeah. And nursing or suckling, that is so strongly associated with safety.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's also a type of heavy work for
Mhm.
our jaws and in our face because it takes a lot of muscles to be
Yeah,
able to pull that liquid up out of that
yeah,
straw.
yeah.
So that doesn't seem like it's an activity, but it is an activity.
I get
Like you were talking about the grape juice, and let's say maybe you drank a little bit too much of it. And then at the end of that, you might go, I knew better. I know better
Mhm.
than to do that. I shouldn't have done that. And we can kind of should on ourselves. Another way to regulate is mindful self compassion. And that's not just saying, oh, look at me, good, yay, me, I'm so good. It's really being intentional to look at yourself and take that negative thought
Yeah,
and be
yeah.
able to flip it. And there is Dr. Kristen Neff on her website. I believe it's mindfulselfcompassion.com. She has books, she has videos, she has lots of free activities on her website to help us work on self
Yeah.
compassion. And that can be it. Look, y'all, positive thinking can get to a point of being toxic. I am not saying to do anything. I am a rather melancholy person and I love myself that way. I can be both happy and melancholy at the same time. They don't have to happen apart from each
Yeah.
other. So it's just part of who I am. I
Mhm.
start thinking about social justice and I start thinking about how many things are not fair and I can get into a place really quickly where I get stuck in that
Yeah.
negative thinking pattern. And even though I'm happy, I'm not doing any of the happy things
Yeah.
because I'm spending all of my energy over here in
With the
melancholy town.
passions.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely, with my
Mhm.
passions, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, mindful self compassion is something where you can say, yeah, you know what? I don't have to have the whole, who was it, Guy Smiley or whatever on
Mhm.
Saturday Night Live, who he would do the I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. He was looking in the mirror.
Yeah,
You don't have to go to that extent, but to
right.
be able to, just look and say, dang, my hair looks pretty good today. Cool.
Yeah.
Or I made a mistake and now I get to learn from that mistake and I'm going to move forward.
Yeah, and I think part of that is just being in touch with, no matter what the cause of our neurodivergence, being in touch with the science behind it, right?
Hmm.
Why did we do things? Why do we need as much repetition as we do to learn something? Why do we struggle either to initiate or complete tasks? You know, the whys behind all of those things. Then instead of berating ourselves for here we are hitting our head against the same wall again and again and again, going back to I ate too much, drank too much orange juice or grape juice or whatever. It's a joke in the diabetic community, the blood sugar roller coaster. When your sugar crashes, you go to the survival part of your brain and it is impossible not to eat. And then typically, unless we have found a way of moderating or disciplining that, we can eat the entire kitchen, which of course sends us to the height of the next hill. And it can be a vicious cycle. But if we learn to, instead of beat ourselves up, I can't believe I got on the roller coaster again. Of course you ate too much because you felt very threatened. You saw your life flashing before your eyes. When we can have compassion for ourselves because we understand the science behind what's going on.
Yep. Absolutely. And that really is where mindful self-compassion. Notice I'm saying mindful
Hmm.
self-compassion, where
Yeah,
you are being very intentional and you are saying, I'm a
yeah,
human being. I
yeah,
have flaws. I'm not perfect. And I'm not going to judge myself good or bad for that.
yeah,
It just is.
yeah. And there's a lot of things that play into that.
Mhm.
During the day, I don't have many of those eat the entire pantry moments. But if my sugar crashes in the middle of the night when I really want to go back to sleep very quickly,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm much more apt to overdo it, to overcorrect
Yep.
in the middle of the night.
Yep. Well, and that's one of those things you know that about yourself,
Hmm.
so you can have a
A
preemptive
plan.
strike. Yep,
Yeah.
you have a plan. You've got
Like my
some.
cry recipe.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
if you have somebody in the house with you, you're
Yeah.
communicating that to them so
Yeah.
they can help you if you need the help.
Yeah.
And that's
There
where
goes
that.
I just want to love on her. What a beautiful snuggle bug.
He is. I just love this little guy. So, how about this?
Oh,
We were talking about mindful self compassion, and
yes.
another one that we can hear a lot of in the positive psychology world, and people have heard me say it's BS, but it's not all BS.
Mhm,
There is some science to it. Just don't take it overboard. Don't
mhm.
pretend to be somebody you're not, right? That's when it becomes toxic when people are telling
Yeah,
you, "Oh, fake it till you make it." Well, you don't have to fake it, but
yeah,
there are things that we can do and we can have gratitude.
yeah,
Gratitude actually helps us regulate.
yeah.
So you can be crying and upset and also have gratitude for something. You can allow
At the
yourself to
same
cry.
time.
Yes, you can allow yourself to be upset and you can regulate yourself so that
Yeah,
your cry can be a healing
yeah,
cry
yeah,
instead of a crisis cry by saying, this is awful. This is terrible. I'm mourning this thing.
yeah,
I'm grieving this loss or
yeah.
this change. And therefore, I'm crying and I'm upset or I'm angry and I'm grateful
Mhm,
that I
mhm.
had this person to love.
Yeah. And
Missing somebody, grieving somebody was an opportunity for you to connect with somebody
yeah,
so you can love them
yeah.
and be grateful for them at the same time.
Right, right. Our rabbi would talk about, in the New Testament, it talks about pray unceasingly. He said one practical way of doing that is, and this was what, 18 years ago or so, he had a little timer. It looked like a pager. The young people now are like, what the heck is a pager?
Pager.
But it looked like a pager and you could set the interval, right? And so he would have it set for 10-minute intervals and you could have it on either noise or vibrate. He, of course, would choose vibrate. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. You can be doing dishes. In his case, he could be teaching a class at the yeshiva. You could, or during his magic show, because he was also a magician. He used to play at that real famous magic venue in Hollywood.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
he was the coolest guy. I really miss him. But every 10 minutes, it would vibrate, and that was his cue to thank God for something. It could be something major, right?
Mhm.
Or it could be something very, very minute. And before you know it, you have an attitude of gratitude, and that takes you so far along that path toward mental health.
Yep. Yep.
Maybe you can get off your meds, but there's still something valid about having, hormonal imbalances, right?
Right.
The
And you can be
dopamine, the
grateful for your
serotonin, and all
medication.
that's exactly,
You can be grateful for your medication.
exactly. Yeah.
And there's so many things that we can be grateful for.
Mhm.
It can be if our natural inclination of who we are is not, we don't look at the positive side of things because we have
Mhm.
a negativity bias. I think we talked about that last time,
Yeah.
actually. We have that negativity bias because that actually helps keep us alive.
Mhm.
Okay. So we learn how to have gratitude sometimes,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't have to be all day long, all the time.
Yeah.
You don't have to go set a 10-minute timer and do it
Yeah.
every couple of minutes. You don't have to
Yeah.
do that. But it's one thing
Yeah.
that maybe your partner or your child, how
Mhm.
cool to have your kids say, "Hey, dad, what are you grateful for?" When
Yeah.
you're in one of those, "Ugh," and that's a question that makes you kind of stop and pull back and think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you have to know.
Yeah.
But it is
Yeah.
again one option to be
Yeah.
able to move from being in a crisis and being
Yeah.
dysregulated to being regulated and then being
Well,
able to do the things that you wanna do.
when I entered first grade, because you're in school all day long for the first time, that's when I realized that I was the only diabetic in my community.
Mm,
It never dawned on me that my brothers don't give themselves shots.
yeah.
Parents don't do this, right? And I came home from school and I said, why me? And it was the only spiritual thing my mama ever said was because God knew you could handle it and no one else could.
Wow.
That for me set my coping pattern lifelong. And no matter how, whether it was being assaulted or my parents' divorce or my own divorce or first time around, whatever the case may be, I would nurse that devastating circumstance, whatever it was. And sometimes it's only a few minutes before I can find the silver lining in that cloud. Sometimes it takes me 3 days,
Uh-huh.
but I'm going to milk that out every possible angle I can think of until I can find the blessing and be grateful for it. And it has helped. It
Yeah,
truly
I
has
mean,
helped.
honestly, 6 months ago, I was not sitting here going, "I'm thankful I had my mom in my life." I was just missing her. I was dealing with it. I was going on and I was able to do things in my life, but I wasn't yet ready to have
Yeah.
gratitude and to be able to say, "I'm lucky enough that she was in my life for the time she was
Mhm.
so that I could know her love." I wasn't ready for that. In fact, I'm just getting into the place where I'm ready for that now. If we would have
Mhm.
done this podcast a month and a half ago, I wouldn't be sitting here at my desk because I have
Mhm.
her things in my office and I'm
Yeah.
not ready to go through them yet. And so I didn't sit at my desk unless I
Yeah.
absolutely had to. And that's okay.
Yeah. Does
That
she
is
live with you guys?
she had in the past, but
Mhm.
she had her own apartment and everything. I was very much a caretaker,
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
doctor's appointments and things like that. And
Yeah.
it you have to grieve and
Yeah.
you can grieve and also have gratitude at the same time.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
move
I
away
I just
from
asked because I'm my mother's caretaker,
uh-huh.
right? So
Yeah. Yeah, it's
yeah.
different. I mean, we move into a place where we are caring for our parents.
Yeah. We flip flop the roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's a loss that you don't understand what it is
Yeah.
until you experience it. right? And everybody experiences it in their own way, whether they've
Right.
had a good relationship, a bad
Yeah.
relationship, no relationship.
Yeah. And just like everything else we've been talking about, everything is individualized
Hmm.
and, everything is unique and there's no right or wrong. There's no
Yep.
prescription for
Right.
grief.
Right. And I mean, the
Yeah.
whole reason that I wrote this little book was because I was irritated when people told me to just breathe because I became a meditation instructor because I knew that just breathe wasn't the answer, and
Yeah.
I had to figure it out. So I had to go and work with some
Yeah.
people and understand, and then, I've been studying the nervous system forever. I had to take those things that I knew and that I understood and
Mhm.
move in that direction with it, like,
Yeah.
"Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Here's how we're gonna put all of that together and help
Yeah.
us make
Yeah.
sense. Because there were a
Well,
lot of me out there who don't
yeah.
tell me to just breathe. I can't do it. I can't meditate. I
Right.
can't do it. I
Right.
can't sit still. I can't stop my thoughts."
Yeah. So we have been going at it for an hour.
Right on.
One final thought
One
to
final thought.
help the audience bring themselves back into regulation or to bring their loved one back into regulation.
Okay, well, we started with laughter.
Mhm.
How about we finish with celebration?
Okay.
People don't often think about celebrating as a form of regulation. Sometimes we get dysregulated because we get excited
Mm.
and we're so excited that we can't. That's all right. Go ahead and finish
Yeah.
that out. Shake your hands, spin around, jump up and down, celebrate whatever you're celebrating because
Mhm.
that activity will absolutely help you regulate. It's okay to do that. It's
Yeah.
absolutely okay. If you're listening and your child is somebody who gets real excited and they're real big and they're real intense, and it's okay. Celebrate with
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
Celebrating with them will actually help them regulate more quickly. Why? Intimate connection.
And the mirror neurons and the whole bit.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I rely on mirror neurons, and that's something else that we really need to call attention to. Mirror neurons are hardwired
Mhm.
into us. It's how babies learn how to regulate themselves
Right,
by mirroring their parents
right.
during infancy, especially during feeding time. That's why babies are so fixated on the faces and the voices of mom and dad.
Hmm.
I will utilize that to bring my mom into
Yes,
regulation. So
yes.
she has Lewy body dementia, much like FASD. The symptoms are hit or miss. They're
Hmm.
very transient. They can, whatever it is, if it's the agitation, if it's the sadness, if it's the shakes, if it's memory glitches, it can last seconds to minutes to hours to days.
Right.
And you're aware of your mind not working right, which is
Right.
very, very cruel, right?
Yes,
It's
yes.
why Robin Williams took his life because he hadn't been diagnosed yet. He didn't understand it. He saw what was happening to his brain and it just freaked him out. So when she gets very agitated, then I don't even talk to her. I come near her
Hmm.
and I, without any words, and by my second breath, she's breathing with me. And we will go through 3 or 4 giant intakes and releases of breath. The mirror neurons are very, very powerful. So if we were to come into that excitement phase together, then if it's your child or your spouse who's very agitated, you can join in on that for moments. And then when you sense the time is right, you can start yourself to slow down and
Yep.
do the breathing, and they should follow.
Yep. Yep. And it might take them a little bit longer. It depends
Mhm.
on, who they are, and
Mhm.
the specific context. But it is true that in general, we see that somebody else is doing this thing and we
Mhm.
start doing it too. And it might be
Yeah.
taking that big, huge breath that we've been
Yeah.
waiting for.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, on that breath, see, I just did it.
You did. You did. I heard it.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to bid you a fond farewell, AJ. And I'm really looking forward to our next conversation once we decide what the heck we're going to talk about.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you tuned in to today's candid conversation, and I hope that you found it valuable